But first to ABC Media Watch, the show that prides itself on spotting inaccurate and misleading information in the Fourth Estate. This week, host Paul Barry was most indignant at the media's criticism of the Albanese government for breaking its election promise not to come after superannuation.
And how can a modest proposal on super that needs voter approval constitute a catastrophe? Do the media have no shame or simply no idea? And somehow the changes became an attack on all Australians, even though they will initially affect only 80,000 taxpayers who have more than $3 million in their super funds.
But what Barry failed to mention is that those indexation will change those numbers completely. As the AFR reported, the number of people affected could climb into the hundreds of thousands eventually due to inflation. How's that for Barry's so-called modest proposal?
The superannuation tax changes proposed by Labor won't take effect until 2025, and they'll only go ahead if voters re-elect this government. But that didn't stop TV and the tabloids branding it a broken promise and a breach of trust.
Labor will legislate changes this year. That makes it a very clear broken promise. But that doesn't stop Barry from running government talking points which are blatantly false. As the AFR's economics editor John Keogh points out, the change will be legislated before the election, making it difficult to unwind unless there is an extremely unlikely Liberal landslide at the next election that captures the Senate. As for The Guardian Australia, just like Media Watch, it was shamelessly spruiking the government's case.
But there is also about $150 billion a year in foregone revenue through tax concessions, $50 billion of that just for super. So Jim Chalmers is putting his little treasure toe in tax reform waters, proposing a very modest change to people with more than $3 million in their super account. Sounds easy, right? And forget about having a grown-up conversation about negative gearing or franking credits, no matter how much they cost the budget and how few they truly benefit.
As for franking credits benefiting only an elite few, well, that's rubbish. As The Australian noted yesterday, franking credits are now claimed by more than 3.1 million mum and dad investors and retirees. Labor claims it's merely removing loopholes in franking credits, but the reality is far different. The Australian again reports that Treasury concedes it can be considered a tax increase. Now, what did Labor tell us after it lost the 2019 election?
Labor has dumped its controversial franking credits policy, with Labor leader Anthony Albanese confirming it won't be taken to the next election. Mr Albanese will pledge to ditch former leader Bill Shorten's 2019 policy. He says the party has heard the message from voters at the last election loud and clear.
Another broken election promise and another case of many in the media turning a blind eye. Well, let's bring in tonight's panel, and joining me is media writer for The Australian, Sophie Ellsworth, and YouTuber and commentator Daisy Cousins. Sophie, let's start with you. Your newspaper, The Australian, has been doing some fantastic reporting on this. What did you make of the ABC's Media Watch, the attempt to spin the story in a way that benefited the government?
Jack, it appeared to me from the ABC Media Watch segment that they must have had Labor's talking points in front of them, because it really seemed like they were on the defence for the Labor Party, which is not their role as the public broadcaster. With any policy, regardless of what topic it's covering, it's up to journalists to ask questions and interrogate that policy. And also, this was said before the election by the Labor Party that they would not make any changes to super. So I really don't understand why there's some concern within the media of why some parts of the media are questioning this policy, as they should. However, in saying that, polling has shown it's been a popular move, what the Labor Party has said that they will do with superannuation. But in saying that, it's up to the media to question these policies. So as for Media Watch seeming to back the Labor Party or promote their talking points seems very strange to me.
And Daisy Cousins, I always find it quite humorous to see that the journalists who were quite critical and scathing of the Morrison government in the name of truth and holding power to account, now that Labor's in power, they just appear to be adopting the talking points.
I know, it's pretty fabulous, isn't it? I mean, maybe we'll see the ABC turning into, you know, what we think the dangers of a publicly funded broadcaster are, which is effectively state media, you know, because this is certainly what it seems like. I agree with Sophie. It was like he had the talking points right there in front of him. And I think ideologically it suits the media so much of it is left wing, because it really is, without explicitly saying it, a hark back to Labor's 2019 big end of town rhetoric, which proved so disastrous at the election because it was just so naff, if you know what I mean. But it really is that, and going on about, oh, people with $3 million, you know, dollars in their superannuation accounts. What they're forgetting, the framing of it is all wrong. If you consider, you know, an aging population, increasing life expectancy, how far does $3 million in your super actually go over the entire course of your retirement? That's not just cash they have in their hands that they can spend on luxury holidays. That's money that people need to live off and perhaps put aside maybe a bit of a nest egg or inheritance for their descendants, and it's money that they've worked extremely hard to get. So again, it's this very, very kind of class warfare framing that Labor's put in sort of tacitly, and the media has just totally picked up on.
Yeah, who cares if they lied, if all those politicians lied and broke those promises, if it means a wealth tax because we like the policy?